Human history is a mosaic of narratives. From the earliest cave paintings to the most complex theories in astrophysics, we have always sought meaning where none was explicitly given. We build grand frameworks of fate, of luck, of cyclical time to make sense of the randomness that defines our existence. Yet look closely at modern life. The obsession with good vibes, the persistent belief in karmic retribution, or the comforting notion that history is destined to repeat itself. These are not purely scientific concepts. They echo patterns refined and discarded by civilizations long past. We have developed tools of unparalleled complexity, the internet, germ theory, orbital mechanics, yet we still seem drawn back to the primal comfort of myth. Why does the highly sophisticated human mind retain a deep, almost magnetic pull toward narratives that previous generations deemed obsolete? What fundamental cognitive need are we fulfilling by revisiting these ancient stories? Perhaps it is because myth offers certainty in an uncertain world. These enduring narratives provide emotional anchors, a sense of belonging and predictable consequence that pure logic often fails to deliver. The impulse to create a story, to assign meaning to the chaos, is not merely cultural, it is deeply cognitive. From an evolutionary standpoint, our ancestors needed explanatory framework, simple myths to navigate an unpredictable world. How did lightning strike? Why did the crops fail? These were events of immense power and zero predictability. The human brain, remarkably efficient but sometimes flawed, developed a powerful mechanism for pattern recognition. It evolved to spot patterns in the environment, predator trails, seasonal shifts, or reliable water sources. This ability is crucial for survival. However, this same wiring makes us susceptible to what scientists call epiphania, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated data points. We are wired to find order, even when only random noise exists. Myth is simply the most ancient, compelling form of pattern recognition we possess. It allows us to transform terrifying randomness into comprehensible narrative consequence. Consider how early shamans interpreted disease outbreaks as divine punishment, a pattern linking illness to moral failure. This cognitive shortcut provided immediate action, appeasement, or ritual cleansing. Myth thus became a survival guide for the soul, structuring our understanding of cause and effect. This innate human need to find order is perhaps best understood through the lens of archetypal psychology. Carl Jung proposed that myths are not merely stories. They are universal containers for profound psychological patterns: the hero's journey, the confrontation with the shadow self. These narratives tap into a deep, shared wellspring of human experience. They offer us a predictable map for navigating life's inherent chaos. When faced with the sheer randomness of existence, myth provides structure. It suggests that even the most terrifying personal struggles or societal upheavals have an underlying pattern, a purpose waiting to be discovered. By participating in these ancient stories, whether through art, ritual, or modern fiction, we are engaging in a collective act of meaning-making. We are transforming existential dread into comprehensible narrative consequence, fulfilling that deep psychological hunger for cosmic order. Consider the enduring power of these structures, from Odysseus's return to modern superhero narratives. These archetypes suggest that growth is always preceded by descent into darkness. By recognizing ourselves within these universal patterns, we don't just understand stories, we begin to structure our own lives with inherent purpose. But what happens when the myths themselves fail? When the comforting narratives, the gods, the cycles, the inevitable heroes are insufficient to explain a crisis of modern scale? History is littered with examples of this failure point. Consider the sudden shockwaves of pandemics or the grinding collapse of economic systems. In these moments of profound uncertainty, scientific explanations often feel too abstract, too slow, or simply inadequate to quell immediate panic. When the established order falters, humanity has a deep-seated instinct to seek certainty elsewhere. We turn back toward structures that promise absolute answers, charismatic figures who speak in riddles, localized superstitions, or grand, overarching conspiracies. These systems don't offer verifiable truth, they offer emotional scaffolding, a feeling of being understood and protected. They are the immediate balm for a soul overwhelmed by chaos, even if the cure is ultimately destructive to critical thought. Look at the early days of the COVID crisis. When public health guidance shifted rapidly, distrust flourished. People sought answers in alternative remedies and political scapegoating, proving that certainty, even false certainty, is often preferred over complex truth. The modern myth we are most deeply invested in is the myth of the self. We have become obsessed with constructing a coherent identity and narrative arc, suggesting that if we simply optimize enough, or change our mindset enough, we will achieve perfect fulfillment. This quest for the self-made life, or the perfectly balanced existence, is itself a profoundly mythic endeavor. Self-help culture, in its modern iteration, functions as a personalized mythology. It provides rituals and actionable steps, yoga routines, productivity hacks, journaling prompts that promise transformation through sheer willpower. We are given blueprints for being better people, suggesting that our deepest struggles are merely matters of poor technique or insufficient self-belief. Yet these narratives often mask deeper structural issues: the lack of community, the precarious nature of modern labor, or the overwhelming anxiety of choice itself. The belief that personal effort alone can conquer systemic entropy is perhaps the most powerful and persistent myth of all. We treat our lives like projects requiring optimization. This focus on internal repair distracts us from examining external forces, the economic shifts, or cultural pressures that shape who we believe we ought to be. The enduring power of these narratives is not merely psychological, it is deeply structural. Throughout history, myth has served as a sophisticated mechanism for social control. When belief systems, whether religious dogma or political ideology, are successfully institutionalized, they provide an unquestionable framework for reality itself. They tell us who belongs, what success looks like, and crucially, why certain hierarchies are immutable. Concepts such as divine right, or the idea of inherent destiny, do not merely describe a state of affairs, they mandate it. By framing social order as divinely ordained or historically inevitable, power structures can discourage questioning authority, transforming dissent into sin or treason. The myth thus becomes a form of intellectual architecture, built to maintain stability for those already at the top, ensuring that critique is seen not just as disagreement, but as a threat to cosmic balance itself. This makes challenging these foundational stories an act of profound resistance. Consider the myth of meritocracy in modern capitalism. It suggests success is purely earned. This narrative subtly shifts blame for inequality from systemic flaws to individual failure, thus maintaining the established economic order. The digital age has provided a powerful accelerant for these ancient patterns of belief. What once required charismatic oratory and physical gathering can now be disseminated instantly across billions of screens. We see this in the resurgence of astrology, where complex life decisions are reduced to planetary alignments read on a smartphone screen. Or consider the enduring appeal of grand conspiracy narratives, the idea that reality is not what it seems, but rather a carefully constructed illusion maintained by hidden powers. These theories thrive in the echo chambers of social media, environments designed not for truth-seeking, but for confirmation bias. By algorithmically feeding us content that validates our existing suspicions, these platforms create self-sealing belief systems. The speed and reach of the internet do not necessarily make people wiser. They simply amplify the volume and velocity of myth, making it harder than ever to distinguish between genuine inquiry and comforting fiction. This digital amplification creates fertile ground for pseudoscience, from debunked medical remedies to alternative history theories. The sheer volume of easily accessible truth overwhelms critical thinking, leaving many adrift in a sea of compelling, yet ultimately baseless, narratives. But recognizing the danger is not the end of the story. We are wired for narrative. Our brains evolve to find patterns and meaning, even where none exist. To dismiss myth entirely is to misunderstand its fundamental utility. Myths at their core are sophisticated tools, universal symbols designed to process overwhelming human experience: grief, transformation, fear, and belonging. They offer a shared language for the things that resist scientific explanation. Instead of seeing them as relics to be discarded, we can learn to understand them as powerful narrative engines. Modern art, literature, and even social movements have mastered this utility. By channeling ancient archetypes, the journey, the shadow self, the quest for wisdom, storytellers today are not merely entertaining. They are building empathy. They are equipping us with a shared emotional vocabulary necessary to address complex modern challenges, transforming myth from mere comforting fiction into vital fuel for collective action and social change. Consider modern activism. Climate strikes use apocalyptic imagery, civil rights movements invoke spiritual narratives. These examples prove myth's enduring power is a dynamic language that continues to shape our moral imagination. So, if myths are not simply falsehoods, if they are instead something deeper, what does their persistence tell us about the human condition? Perhaps we have been looking at this through the wrong lens entirely. The need for narrative coherence is not a flaw in our intelligence. It is perhaps its most defining feature. We are meaning-making machines, wired to seek patterns and causality where none might strictly exist. Science excels at providing the mechanisms of existence, the physical laws governing our stars and cells. But myth continues to provide the why. It addresses the profound questions: why do we suffer? Why does beauty matter? What is our purpose here? The value of myth lies not in its literal truth, but in its capacity to hold a shared emotional vocabulary for humanity's deepest anxieties and highest hopes. Our task then is not to discard these stories wholesale, but to understand them critically. To recognize the powerful currents of narrative that shape our lives, to become fluent readers of both the scientific treatise and the ancient epic.